The worst part of being a kid was not having adults take you seriously when you knew what you were talking about. What is an example of this that happened to you as a child? I once bought a game, and when I opened it outside the shop, it had no disc in it. I went back and they didn't believe me, so I argued with them for at least 30 minutes before they tried to kick me out, saying I was scamming them. After about an hour, they kept telling me to leave and get out of the way and trying to then ignore me. In total, I got them to check the CCTV, and the manager hadn't put the disc in the case. They were separate to stop thieves. Without a word, he got a copy and threw it at me and stormed off. Complained about stomach aches every morning for a week, and my parents thought I just wanted to skip school. The next weekend, they wanted to set me straight, so I was taken to the doctor. Turned out, I had hepatitis A. One of my friends committed for over a year, and the doctor told him he was faking. It's anxiety, it's attention-seeking. Massive brain cancer. Tried to tell them my knee was bothering me, was told it's just growing pains. Finally go in about 2 years later, got a scope done, and doc says, "Man, if we would have got this earlier, we could have avoided the surgery." Man, parents really don't want to believe that their kids are actually sick, huh? I mean, I get it. It's expensive if you don't have good insurance, but still, that sucks. I had a birthmark that was displaying all the classic signs of skin cancer, but every time I tried telling my mom about the concerning symptoms, she brushed me off. She didn't even look. Eventually, after 3 to 4 weeks, I was taken to see a doctor, and the situation then escalated very quickly. Long story short, I ended up having a cancerous tumor the size of an orange removed from the area below my birthmark. The doctor had many stern words with my mother after that, and I was monitored for a while. Not really as a child, but when I was 14, I had severe side pain from a kidney stone, and my parents didn't take my pain seriously until after a few days, and by that time I was literally on my knees begging them to take me to the ER. If your kid starts begging you to take them to the ER, please listen to them. I begged my parents that we stop in Paris as we drove back to the UK from our holiday, and whilst we were there, we visited the Eiffel Tower. We parked nearby, and from the top I could see our car being towed. I told my parents, but they wouldn't listen. They thought I was joking, and being young, I assumed their response meant it wasn't a big deal. Luckily, our car was some 4x4 thing, not good with the breeds of cars, so the towing guys were still trying to move it. They told us to get out of the city as soon as possible as it was about to be locked down. Later in life, I discovered on that day there was an assassination attempt on the French president. An assassination attempt by a 4x4 vehicle? Are you sure it wasn't yours? Are we sure you weren't a part of the scheme? Seems awfully suspicious, you begging your parents to take you to Paris that day. I remember being into space as a kid and telling my mom's drug addict boyfriend that the sun is a star. Dumb C refused to believe I was right. F-face, the sun is a star, everyone knows that. When I was in middle school, I needed glasses because I couldn't see the board. I told my parents. They said I was looking for attention. I brought binoculars to school so I could see. They didn't take me to an optometrist until the school nurse did rudimentary eye exams on every student in the school and wrote my parents that I needed glasses. Same thing happened with braces. My dentist had been hinting for years that I needed braces, and they didn't take me to an orthodontist until he wrote a referral to one who was just down the street. I had had crooked teeth and an entire adult set for years at that point. My sister faked bad eyesight when she was young, because of which they believed I was lying as well. It was only after every single teacher of mine said, "Your child is blind as F," they got my eyes tested. I've been wearing glasses for 10 plus years now, and I can't see crap without them. In kindergarten, we had different skills to learn, and after learning each one, there was a poster that we got to write our name on if we learned the skill. These were things like being able to tie our shoes or button a shirt. One was for if we knew our birthday. There was a mix-up and the teacher had my birthday written down for a different month. I knew my correct birthday, but I was told I was wrong. Even after it was proven that I knew my birthday, I still didn't get to put my name on the poster. Same, but it happened with the spelling of my own name. Begged my parents not to send me to school as I wasn't feeling well. It was photo day, so understandably they sent me because they thought I was lying to get out of it. Got the photos back and can see the chicken pox around my neck. That's kind of wild to me. I don't remember feeling at all ill from chicken pox, just incredibly itchy. Depends on the severity and age, I think, but chicken pox can make you feel like total trash. The itching is just the part that stands out the most, at least for me. In the 6th grade, I fell on my roller skates. I was sure I'd broken my wrist, but my mother, a radiologist technician, the woman literally takes x-rays of broken bones for a living, told me I was just faking it for attention. A week later, it was still swollen, I couldn't write correctly, and my PE teacher wasn't letting me participate. And he sent home a note that finally prompted my mother to take me into the doctor. Come to find out, I definitely had broken my wrist and was in a cast for 8 weeks. Felt sick as heck, but forced to go to school. Ended up throwing up and having severe food poisoning for the next few days. Those were some bad nights. It became a boy who cried wolf scenario for me. I would regularly try to fake being sick to get the day off from school, and when I actually had a bad case of the shoots, they wouldn't budge, and I ended up spending half my day in the nurse's room running between the bed and the toilet. My grandparents went to Australia for a year. Whilst they were gone, my mother was asked to drop by to check on their house, but would often just wait in the car and have me go in. One time I noticed that the next-door neighbors who were building an extension had taken down the dividing fence and put scaffolding into my grandparents' garden. I told my mother, who brushed it off as imagination. The next time, they'd started to build on my grandparents' land, destroying my grandfather's prized rhubarb patch. I told my mother, and same thing happened. By the time my grandparents came home, the extension was fully built and had been for months. My grandma was so annoyed at my mother for not doing anything to stop this, but I think they were so kind they didn't do anything about it and the neighbors got away with it. Dang shame if someone accidentally lit that extension on fire. Dang shame. And to think the owners are in Australia. Those neighbors can eat crap. I don't care how nice you are. If your neighbors ruin part of your yard to build their own crap, you sabotage that thing and start a feud that goes on for generations. Kindergarten. Need to pee. Teacher. No, you don't. Teacher 5 minutes later, struggling to peel off my pee-soaked stockings. Also kindergartner. Need to throw up. Teacher. No, you don't. Immediate result, bright orange vomit on Christmas green carpet. To this day, I find the obsession with preventing kids from going to the bathroom at school really fricked up. I'd always hoped it would make sense to me when I got older, but it doesn't. It's just messed up. Pretty sure I have mild Tourette's, head and neck jerks at absolutely random times, and it's gotten progressively worse. Parents decide to mock me on it, and apparently if I concentrate enough, I'll be able to control it. It's been 2 years now, and I still haven't gotten a diagnosis yet. I come from a family of doctors that mock you for getting sick or just in general having any medical issue. Could be an essential tremor. I've been looking into it recently, and it sounds like what I've been dealing with too. I told my mom when my dad was abusing me, and she didn't believe me or didn't want to, and since that was exactly what he had said would happen if I told, I never tried again. Then when I told her again in my 20s after I cut him out of my life, she asked me over and over if I was sure and didn't stop until her constant asking caused the worst panic attack I've ever had in my life. Thank you to the couple of people who will read this comment. It feels nice to know that somebody knows and hopefully somebody believes me. I've always loved reading, and I love to apply what I'd learned about writing techniques, spelling, and grammar to my schoolwork. We had a substitute teacher for a while in primary school who once red-penned, marked as wrong, my work for using the interrobang punctuation combo and the word accumulative. She also didn't believe me when I wrote about foxgloves being poisonous to many animals and wasn't interested in seeing the botanical book that proved it. Ignorant much? I'd love to see what she shares on Facebook. Okay, not really. For those of you who may be ever so slightly confused at the term I used, the pairing of an exclamation mark and question mark is called an interrobang. I know this because I once really wanted it as a tattoo, and now you know it as well. I was maybe 4 or 5 years old and my mom took me with her to run errands. We ended up at the mechanic where my mom was getting her car repaired. She places me on the counter. I tell my mom, "I don't feel well, Mom." She ignores me. I tell her again, "Mom, I don't feel very well." She waves me off, disregards me, and takes out her credit card to pay. I pipe up once again, "Mom, I don't feel..." I throw up on the counter. Child vomit all over the counter. The clerk turns to my mom and says, "Oh, is she not feeling well today?" As my poor mother picks up her dripping credit card. "No, I don't think she is," replies my mom, still processing what just happened. A fun mixture of disgust and surprise on her face. Power to her, she never disregarded me or ignored me ever again after that when I told her I felt sick, so there's that at least. that my parents were abusive. All their friends thought they were just normal people. It wasn't until my mom had a mental breakdown from me moving away and cutting contact because she couldn't control me anymore that people started to realize that maybe they were a bit abusive. Still to this day, I get a few, "Oh, they weren't that bad," or "They did it because they love you" from random people who had good childhoods and couldn't even possibly wrap their narrow, boneheaded minds around the fact that a parent of anyone can be abusive. Listen to kids when they tell you about abusive behavior. This is something every adult needs to understand. I know it won't always turn out to be true, but better to have it checked out and be wrong than not have it checked out but be true. And yeah, there have been instances where that has wrongfully ruined an adult's life, but just because some adults are bad at investigating that stuff doesn't mean we should just say, "Sorry kids, you're on your own." I don't have all the answers, but I just hate hearing about kids experiencing that crap. I would constantly feel sick after every breakfast and lunch at school. My stomach would hurt so badly and I would have to go to the bathroom. I just knew something was off. I told my mom and asked to go to the doctor, and she said, "It's fine, it's just anxiety." I lost 12 pounds and found out my annual physical for school that I have celiac disease and my small intestine was just destroyed. I tried using a secondhand reclining chair we just got and it collapsed around me. I was still small enough to get wedged in the pieces. Called out for help as I was stuck in the chair and all I got was, "If you want to talk to me, come here and speak properly." Spent an hour in a chair. Fun. My mom was convinced earthworms were the same as parasitic worms and called me a rude smart butt when I tried to explain that the earthworm I was holding was not going to burrow under my skin. I tried explaining to my mother that not all snakes, especially the ones at the zoo, are not poisonous and they do not want to kill everything it sees. She still fears them and calls me smart butt. To be fair, I think she would probably be more concerned about the snakes being venomous unless you were grabbing and eating the snakes at the zoo, which you probably shouldn't do. Now, who's a smart butt? When I was 5 or 6, I was looking down on the balcony when I felt wind on my left ear and saw a solid freaking red brick falling and then crashing on the floor to dozens of pieces. I immediately look up and saw my neighbor with his brother, 15 years old at the time, laughing their butt off. When I told my parents, they laughed and told me that I watched too much cartoon. They still don't believe me 25 years later. Your neighbor's brother is a dong. Growing up, I noticed I couldn't hear properly. It became more apparent when my mom was hoovering up and I only needed to cover one ear. Parents didn't believe me. Teachers didn't believe me. They just said I wasn't listening. I was in high school when my parents realized there might be a problem. The doctor said it was common for kids to fake it for attention and my parents could try cleaning my ears out. Another 2 years before a doctor did a full check and found that I was completely deaf in one ear and mostly deaf in the other, with likelihood of going fully deaf, and they cannot find the actual cause. It's essentially a natural degradation of my ability to hear, and it's like genetic since my gran on my mother's side also had it starting with the left ear, same as me. My mom, on the other hand, had a degradation of sight starting in her left eye, and apparently she was just terrified of me being deaf because it would be her fault. Grade 2 teacher initially refused to let me do a diorama on the epoch for an animal because she didn't realize it was an actual animal. Took me bringing in a printed article on it to convince her to let me do it. To be fair to her, though, I didn't use its more well-known name as the water opossum. To be more fair, I've still never heard of it. Yeah, I have no idea if I pronounced Yapok correctly, and frankly, I'm not about to look it up. Okay, I will. It's Yapok, and they're adorable. Tried to tell my mom that she was in a horribly abusive relationship. It had been 8 years by that point. They would regularly fight, and she'd take me around to my grand's, her mother, for a few days. She'd always say, "This time I won't go back," and I'd say, "Yes, you will." I was miserable, and I never gave up trying to tell her to leave. She told me that because I was only a teenager, my brain was still developing, and that I was literally incapable of empathy. I had never known love. I would understand when I was older. Anyways, now I'm nearly 30, and I haven't spoken to her in years. My siblings had built a Wile E. Coyote ladder of random stuff from our backyard to get to the roof so they could jump from the roof onto our trampoline. I asked if I could do it, but being like 6, they said no, that I would get hurt. And because I was 6, I decided this was grounds to tattle. I went straight inside and told our parents exactly what was going on, and it was so ridiculous that not only did they not believe me, they didn't even bother checking. They wouldn't find out for another 7 years when I brought it up again as a fun memory during dinner. Let me guess, when your parents finally did check, the ladder had already disappeared because of an evil scientist's innator, which was intended to help take over the tri-state area. My family was the I went to school no matter how sick I was, so you will too types. But they were also the we can't take time off or we might get fired and it's illegal to leave you at home types, which also goes hand in hand with the prescription medicine is expensive and if you don't go to the hospital, you'll be better and save us some money types. I don't know what the heck I had, but I think it was some kind of lung infection, bronchitis or something. No idea. I think I did end up getting some pills over the weekend so I wouldn't have to stay home on Monday. The school wasn't happy, lol. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. In 7th grade, we had to do a report on the Revolutionary War and include different items. One was a poem that I had fun writing, and the teacher liked it and read it to the class when we were doing research in the library. Afterwards, the librarian came up to me and said, "Tell your dad it was a good poem," with a tone that implied he thought my dad wrote it for me. Another teacher didn't believe me in PE running laps that, out-of-shape me, couldn't breathe. She told me to keep going. I tried but ended up hyperventilating and twisted my ankle. She finally let me sit down. The librarian portion makes my blood boil. What a miserable butthole. One time I was like 13 and I spent an entire afternoon cleaning a pool for a pool party a family friend was having. When I'm just finishing up, some random guy shows up and says, "Oh, look at the kids having fun and pretending they're being helpful." I'm 29 and still salty about it. Honestly, I would be too. You push that man into the pool and hold him down with the pool cleaning equipment and just say, "Better call an adult for help. I'm just a kid." What is wrong with me? Ooh, interrobang. I've got a master in electrical engineering. My parents, until recently, refused to let me fix things. A professional should do it. Like, what the F did you spend all that money on my education for? I was homesitting for 2 weeks, and when they returned, I had repaired several things that were bothering me. I tend to stay there a lot. My mother was genuinely impressed with something she should have known to be true for more than 10 years. Now she actually asks me to fix stuff. Same with computers here, although mostly my grandparents still don't trust me after 7 years of computer science. They also still try to understand virtually every button I press, so the one time I did help them, it took hours of explaining. My mom never believed me when I said we shouldn't water our indoor plants every day, especially not in winter. 3 pots of dead plant later, she might have started to come around, but I kinda hated her a little more by then. Begging my parents for help with my mental health at age 12. I knew I had anxiety and depression, and I told my parents, and they shrugged it off. It took a self-termination attempt for them to realize it wasn't anything they could ignore. I had the same experience, and my mom's response was, "I can't deal with this right now," in a condescending way. Fast forward 11 years, and I'm good now. I made 2 attempts in that time span, but I still haven't forgotten about that. It sucks to not be listened to when you need it most. Mental health isn't just something adults deal with. Parents, listen to your kids. In primary school, we had a quiz, Year 5 versus Year 6. I was in Year 6, age 10. One question asked was, what was the first motorway built in the UK? My older brother had told me this bit of trivia only a few weeks prior, so I raised my hand immediately and say, the M6. I was told I was wrong, and then Year 5 answered with the M1 and was told they were correct. I was initially confused, thinking my brother, who always knew random trivia and was never wrong about things like this, must have got it wrong or told me wrong. I protested, but to no avail, and my classmates mocked me for getting the question wrong. I went home that day and asked my brother, who confirmed that it was the M6 Preston Bypass. This was before internet was readily available, so I wasn't able to say for certain, but my brother was the authority on this sort of thing. So I was confident I was correct, and now more annoyed at the teachers. Went into school the next day, and a teacher came up to me and apologized and said I was right. They looked it up afterwards. Shame they only said that in private and not with the rest of the class listening and finding out that I was actually right. Me telling my father that standing up and fighting the school bully is the worst idea ever. I ended up getting stabbed in the crotch on the school bus. To be honest, it's generally the better idea to stand up while avoiding to ridiculize him or anything that could cause retaliation. If you don't react, they will continue picking on you forever. I wish I had advice for this, but I only had one bully in high school, which was weird enough. Like, seriously, you're doing this in high school? But the way I got him to stop involved a bit of violence. That's a story for another day. Maybe. I stuttered a lot as a kid, so no one ever knew what I was talking about. I got bullied by students, teachers/staff members, my brothers, and their friends. Even my own freaking parents who thought discipline would help instead of actual helping. I will always remember my mom saying, "Jesus, will you stop doing that stupid I thing? It's really freaking annoying." Fell on my arm when I was 12 or 13, hurt like heck. Got told to quit whining. 4 days later, it still hurt whenever I tried to use my hand. Day 5 at the doctor's, they told me I had broken a bone in my wrist. I do not whine anymore, though. I have a rare genetic disorder that causes tumors in the smooth muscle that contracts pores. My first and most aggressive patch of tumors cropped up on my leg when I was 12. They are very visible and very painful. I showed them to my mom, and she was like, "Oh, you're just being self-conscious because you're getting older. That's just acne." I continued to complain about this same patch of tumors for several years. I was not taken to a dermatologist until I was 17. My mom, being satisfied with a vague diagnosis and an overpriced foaming ointment which has zero effect on actual tumors, I was not properly diagnosed until I was 19, after a year of the tumors being blamed on me not properly using the ointment, and a year of me living abroad. Unfortunately, the only way to deal with the first and largest patch would be for me to have a skin graft. So far in my adult life, I have not had time for this. I definitely could have managed it as a kid had I been diagnosed at 12. I'm 27 and am in pain daily. Parents in their 50s, both in poor health, decide to build a new house in a crappy area instead of taking my advice to buy an existing house in a nicer area, popular beach suburb. I found nice places on the internet and took a day to drive them both around to inspect. Instead, they dropped $500K on a newly built double-story townhouse around the corner from social housing. No walk to beach, no walk to shops, complaints about unsavory characters in the area. Inability to climb stairs due to back injury that's been a problem since 1983. To cap it all off, they asked me to sell my things, car, horse, partners, cat, etc., because they needed the money because the pension didn't pay much. They failed to plan for their future. I reported to my parents and anyone who'd listen that a big bulge had developed in the bottom of the water tower atop the hill above our neighborhood. They just smiled and said I was too young to know what a bulge is and that it was just part of the structure. Shortly thereafter, the water tower burst, unleashing a torrent of water and flooding the neighborhood below. The most frustrating part about a lot of these stories is they only require the dumb adults to just look at a thing. Just go and look, you infuriating effers. When learning to drive, my parents had this thing where revving the car past 3,000 RPM was somehow hurting the car or being reckless. Do you know how gutless cars used to be? A 92 1.6-liter Corolla as one example. Plus, they only ever had manuals, so they would be constantly laboring the engines and only shifting down when absolutely necessary. But I was the one thrashing the cars. Note, it's not like I was chasing the red line or anything, but a small 4-cylinder car needs some spin to get up the hills, man. That I didn't trust my head teacher when I was in primary school, and that I didn't feel well when at that school. It was due to anxiety. Fast forward to the age of 17. I now know that the head teacher threatened to lock a kid with Down syndrome in a cupboard. She has a kid with Down syndrome. She covered up a teacher locking an autistic kid in a cupboard. She reported my family, along with many others, to social services because my parents were causing my brother to cry all the time. He had a diagnosis of IBS, and his tics, he had Tourette's, were incredibly painful, and no one believed that he had Tourette's at that school, even after it was diagnosed. Same with the IBS. They also reported my family on the basis that they caused my autism and that my younger sister, she's autistic, was showing signs of copying older brother. Basically, they gaslighted my parents when they treated my brother horribly. I had left at this point. I'm now on medication for life to sort my anxiety, depression, and stress. My parents feel so guilty that they didn't listen to me when I begged to be homeschooled. I'm now home educated regardless of the pandemic and going on to my A-levels. They get emotional whenever I bring up my time at primary and now listen and take me seriously. I'm just getting angrier and angrier. Parents, I know you think kids are just going to complain about teachers in school because kids just don't like school, but holy crap, please investigate that stuff. There are way too many awful people in this world to just trust your kids to what are basically strangers. One night when I was sleeping, I heard some movements in my house. I freaked out and called my parents, who were sleeping in the next room, but they didn't listen to me and thought that I had a bad dream. The next day, we woke up to find that our house had been burgled. I was a paranoid kid and complained to my parents about leaving doors unlocked at night, but we were in a safe area and I shouldn't watch so many crime shows, they said. Took my mom's purse being stolen one night for them to listen. Honestly, lucky it was just stuff and not way worse. I was 10 and it was like 3 a.m. I was sleeping alone in my bedroom when I heard a knock on my window. I was too scared to check, so I hid in my blanket, but the knock won't stop. Then I quickly ran to my parents' bedroom to tell them about the knock. They came with me to check, but the knocking sound was already gone. My parents told me that it was probably nothing and I was imagining things. So I went up to bed again, but this time I left the lights on. Literally 2 minutes after my parents left, I heard another knock on the window, but this time the lights were on and I saw the face of a man looking at me. I immediately ran to my parents' bedroom and told them what I saw, but this time they didn't believe me. My parents closed the window and the curtains and instead turned on the air conditioning that went back to sleep. The knocking stopped, but I didn't sleep that night. Sorry for my bad English. Your English is better than mine, coming from a native English speaker. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.